Welcome then to another look at rugby league in the south of England. In this episode, chat, reaction and discussion of Broncos Challenge Cup Quarter-Final win. Broncos chief executive Gus Mackay gives his take on the proposed structural changes to Super League. Broncos legend Steele Retchless, need I say more? The member of the 99 Cup Final losing side talks of the impact a cup run can have 14 years on. Skolars coach Joe Mbu backs the Broncos as we talk about the Northern Rail Bowl final and a preview of No Helmets Required, a book about some American footballers who decided to tour Australia a few years ago. If you want to give your thoughts on the programme at any time or about anything we discuss, you can email rldownsouth@gmail.com or you can tweet at Ian Ramsdale. The first clip, though, albeit slightly out of date now, but hopefully an interesting discussion, is from a trip that I had to the Don Valley Stadium in Sheffield on Friday.
We're on the road, and quite literally on the road, on our way up to Sheffield Eagles for the Challenge Cup Quarter-Final game. I say we. I've got Jamie Hill in the car with me. We're covering for BBC London this evening, so plenty planned for our programme tonight. You'll probably be listening to this, well, you will be listening to this after the game has finished, so we don't know at this moment how it will finish. But Jamie, what have we got ahead of us this evening, because it's such a massive game?
Yeah, I think so. Probably being the biggest that London have played in, well, their recent history, I would say. I mean, you've got to go back to 1999 maybe, and the semi-final they beat Castleford in with Steele Retchless's try, and you think, well, is it the biggest game they've played since then? They should win tonight. They should give themselves a shot at the semi-finals. They should give themselves one 80-minute burst possibly away from Wembley. But the fact that we're here, the fact that I think we're quite nervous about the game tells you all you need to know about what we think might happen tonight, in that London should win, but Sheffield with 15 straight wins, top of the championship, defending championship holders in the form of their lives, with a real momentum about them under Mark Aston, will go into this game feeling they can do to London what Castleford had done to them by Featherstone last year.
Well, we're just approaching junction 27 of the 27 of the M1. We're on our way up. We'll talk about the history of these two sides in a moment, but the massive nature from both of these sides, they probably arguably see it as their easiest passage through to a possible semi-final game. You know, Sheffield will see it as Broncos bottom of the table. Broncos know that Sheffield are on the championship side. The consequences of either side winning, whichever way it goes, is huge.
Yeah, it's well, it'd be fantastic for Sheffield, wouldn't it? Because they've been on the up for a very long time now. I mean, they've had their traumas. I mean, they've been around for only 29 years. That's less than a club's been going in London, believe it or not. And, in that time, they've won the Challenge Cup. They've been working their way up from the bottom. Then they got merged with Huddersfield by the RFL, and then they've had to do it all over again. Formed by a man who's gone on to do great things at Leeds, in Gary Hetherington. And in many ways, you can actually feel that these two sides have got a lot in common, because, Sheffield have had a lot of off-the-field trauma. London have done likewise. I think lots of people in London at the moment would think that the RFL have not given them the support in the same way that Sheffield have maybe not been supported by the RFL. And although Sheffield is in South Yorkshire, it's not a heartland club. It's had to work at getting a fan base in much the same way that London's had to do. South Yorkshire's just not been as much of a rugby league hotbed as parts of West Yorkshire, Humberside, the M62 corridor. For London, with such a poor season in the Super League, and I think we've got to say it like that. I mean, a few weeks ago against Wigan, I thought they'd still comfortably beat last year's tally of points, but they might not do that now. And that was a season where Tony Ray came in and really transformed the squad's fortunes. The Challenge Cup is now the be-all and end-all for them, isn't it, Ian? Because, if they win today, it gives them that semi-final. It gives them a national platform on which to play one game that could give them one big opportunity to sell the game down in London. And as much as I do, probably better than I do, Ramo, there's been a lot of doom and gloom around London lately.
Absolutely. It's not been a great year, has it, really? And like you say, I think they are so similar in what they've had historically, but also the fact of, I guess, that Challenge Cup speciality, and the cup means something to them. Broncos back in '99 getting to the final. It's David Hughes, the chairman, always sort of trots out the fact of his love as the FA Cup, the Challenge Cup, and that he'd like to.
Dave Wigan, that.
He'd like to, lead the side out again at Wembley. And 1998, the year before, Sheffield win it, the biggest Challenge Cup final shock ever. I know that tonight, when we arrive at the Don Valley, those memories of 98, those stories of 98, the people of 98 are going to be all around there, and they want to see the Sheffield Eagles do it again. And the Broncos have definitely identified the Challenge Cup this year as a competition they want to do well in. I mean, how do you see it going, Jamie? I mean, nothing would surprise me. I'm going to use the phrase again. I said it ahead of the Salford game. Nothing would surprise me. I think, and here we go, putting my neck on the line, I'm going for a very tense, fairly low scoring, close game in which the Broncos just edge it by the end.
Yeah, I can see exactly where you're coming from with that, Ian. I think it will be very close. I'm not sure about the low scoring myself, though, just because London's defence is not that good.
No, I wasn't sure about that.
Equally, Sheffield's defence in recent weeks, I mean, Mark Aston's been saying, well, they've not been playing too well lately, but it's a championship defence at the end of the day, and a Super League team should be able to pick its way through that. I mean, they put up 24 points against Featherstone in round 4, didn't they, before they produced that brilliant performance against Bradford. And Featherstone, possibly along with Sheffield, are the toughest test in the championship right now. The difference, I guess, is that they've got that imponderable in Jamie Soward now, because although he's been here for 3 weeks, he's only played in 2 of those games. He came off the bench, jet-lagged against Salford, went down to Catalan in a sauna, really. That's about the first time I think Castleford and Catalan have been described in the same breath, meteorologically at least. 37 degrees last week. It's not ideal to bring in a player like that, but again, he played well. And if he's had a week to actually organise them, and that's the one thing he brought to the table against Salford, I thought, was the organisation. Suddenly the Broncos looked like a team that knew what they were doing on the pitch, and that's not to say that Tony Ray's not been doing the right things. It's just that when you have a situation as they've had this season, you've got to have leaders on the pitch. You've got to have people who can say, look, this is not right, this is how you put it right, this is what you do if you've got an overlap situation, this is what you do if you've got a 2-on-1. This is how you get people behind in the tackle. And he was immediately a part of the team, wasn't he? Because the one thing that I remember from that game against Salford was Dan Sargentson, I think, got collared in a tackle. He didn't like it one bit. And the first person to go across the ensuing ruck was Jamie Soward, wasn't it? So I think it might be relatively high scoring, but I do think London should win.
It's probably worth pointing out as well, we're still crawling in traffic. We're still approaching junction 27 of the M1, 40 miles an hour restrictions, but all we can see are currently backs of lorries and backs of cars and a fair lot of red light. So we'll mention the conditions in just a second, Jamie, but I guess you mentioned Soward. He spoke to me in the week and said pretty much the main reason that he's here is to do something with the side in the Challenge Cup. You know, it was, I say a big draw, it was probably the deal clincher. You know, they went, you know, you can have a go in the Challenge Cup and see what we can do. We've got a game against Sheffield Eagles from the Championship. He's done his research, he knows what's ahead of them today. And you talk about that organisation. I didn't see the game, I've only seen the highlights of the Catalans' defeat, but that organisation does seem to be there when he's around, but they have to tighten up in the opening sort of 20-30 minutes. There is a big question mark and a big concern that if Sheffield can score some early points, can put that question mark in the back of the Broncos player's mind, it could turn out, well, I'm going to say it could turn out the way that everyone who isn't a Broncos fan wants it to turn out tonight.
Yeah, of course, and I think that's hit the nail on the head, hasn't it? Because, I mean, the game was lost against Salford in the period before he came on. 28-point gap was too much for him to overcome on his own with the extra influence that he brought to the team. And even last week we're saying, they played much better, but they were well behind on the score sheet at half-time, and, you know, the late comeback was again a bit too late. And not many teams go to Catalan and even get as close as the Broncos did, but if they kept the game tighter at half-time, they could have gone on to win that game, and that would have been, I think we'd have come here tonight thinking, Ramo, that they're going to win this quite comfortably, actually, if they'd beaten Catalan in Perpignan.
Well, that's exactly what we should be thinking, isn't it? I mean, when you look at it on paper, this is a Super League side against a Championship side. The Super League side train, I think Mark Aston said, 30 hours a week. They train 2 nights a week. You know, it's incomparable, really. And we've watched the temperature on the thermometer clock in the car sort of steadily rise as we've driven up the M1. 27.5 degrees currently outside. We're 30 miles short of Sheffield now. You'd have thought, the game in Catalans doesn't really have any sort of significance, so to speak, but Broncos are used to playing at such an intensity and quite possibly in such draining conditions. Maybe the Sheffield Eagles won't have, and as much as I expect it to be close, maybe in the last sort of 20, 15, 25 minutes, the game might just go quite far. And to be fair, that's exactly what should happen today. Sheffield are going to up their game. They're going to battle against the Broncos. They know what to do. They know how to break them down. They know how to score tries. They will score tries. But by the end of the game, really, we should be talking about a Broncos win.
The only worry I have in that respect is that Sheffield don't have anything to lose at all, do they? Because they've obviously in the week been given this great big carrot with the Super League reorganisation that's going to happen from the end of next season.
Absolutely.
That's saying to them, it's saying to Featherstone, it's saying to Halifax, it's saying to anybody who's got a bit of ambition in the Championship now that the door's open. We have to wait and see how that pans out, but it could well be it's promotion, relegation. If you're in the top two, well done. Into the Super League you go, congratulations, and that's going to start that feeling in the Championship that it's not such a closed shop, that it might lower the gap between the bottom end of the Super League and the top of the Championship. The worry I would have about that is that it's going to greatly increase the gap between the top of the Super League and the bottom end of the Super League even further, but it will say to the Championship clubs, this is your time to shine. And what a better chance for Sheffield to do that than tonight on a game that's being televised, that's being broadcast nationally on radio, that's being, given a lot of attention by us here on BBC London as well. And for them then to say, look, there's not much of a gap, there's one place between us in the pyramid, and frankly at the moment we're a better team than London are. They've got the Northern Rail Cup final next week as well, so they could be going into a semi-final of the Challenge Cup, winning silverware in the Northern Rail. They've already booked a playoff place in the Championship. They could easily be going on to win that as well. It's that one of those feelings you get, a bit like Man United in '99, isn't it, Ramo? When you thought, well, the treble, they can't do the treble, can they? And I'm not suggesting for 1 second they're going to win the Challenge Cup, by the way, but you just thought, well, they can't do that. They can't win the league and the FA Cup and the European Cup. And along the way you thought, well, that's that. A man sent off in the FA Cup semi-final, that's it. Man United can't do the treble now. They go a goal down to Bayern Munich in the Champions League final, 1 minute left on the clock. You think, well, that's it. Great effort, but the treble's gone. Sometimes things almost seem to have a life of their own. They develop a momentum that it seems impossible for people to stop. And I'm sure Sheffield will probably be thinking, we've got that sort of moment going right now.
Intriguing is the word that I've used, and I'll probably use it on our coverage this evening, but I just think it's fascinating what possibly could happen this evening. It really could go any way. We all know what the results should be, but again, the magic of the cup and all that, you just never know. We're about to find out. We're going to speak to various people. You mentioned the structural changes as well for the Super League in the future. We're hoping to hear from Gus Mackay, so hopefully a bit of that in the podcast as well, and a couple of players, and we'll find out the result. And just as we start to speed up on the M1 as well, look at this, Jamie, above 30 miles an hour as we have eventually got past junction 27. Is it 27? Keep saying 27. Yeah, so what, we're 5 to 5 now. We're expected in Sheffield about 6 o'clock. Oh, guess what, there's more red lights. Jamie will catch up on the other side of, well, who knows. Well, Jamie, I was very worried that this might be quite a long, short in terms of our journey up, but quite a long journey back to London after that game. It wasn't to be. Broncos with a comfortable victory in the end. They did the job, didn't they? They had a game plan, they set out their stall, they didn't panic, they did the job, and I don't know, what did Tony Ray say at the end? How happy was he?
Well, actually, when he spoke to me, he was a bit downbeat because I think he felt there were still some errors in the game that they could have ironed out, and I think most of all, he doesn't want them thinking now that they've got 2 weeks until their next game, because of course they've got a league match in between that as well, and they are very proud of that record of not finishing bottom of the Super League, and I think he really desperately wants to make sure they don't end up in that position. But I think that was a very good performance. I think if a Castleford or a Wakefield had gone there, or even a higher ranked team such as a Huddersfield had gone there and won 29-10, I think everyone would have said nothing to see here, move along, job very well done by the Super League team. Sheffield showed in flashes why they're top of the Championship. I think they'll feel that they let themselves down in a couple of areas where ball retention was a massive problem for them. I'd love to see what their set completion rates were. I don't think it was that high, but the intensity of a Super League team just overpowered them in the end, and it was nice to see a really decent London defensive display.
Yeah, I was going to say, it wasn't the best of games, was it? In particular, Sheffield were quite scrappy, dropped the ball quite a lot. I mean, I've never seen them cough up possession quite as often as they did, which definitely helped the Broncos. Neither side really took all of the chances that they had, and in the end it was just Broncos' superiority, really, wasn't it, that stuck it out in the end. I think that Broncos they'll be pleased. They did what they set out to do. They're in the semi-finals. We talked about the emphasis that they've put on the competition, and I just hope that they can use it in some way to increase their form in the Super League. There is now a danger again that they'll prioritise the Challenge Cup, not too much, but they want to make the Challenge Cup final now. You know, you're 80 minutes away from Wembley. You've got to be there. But there is a big element that, okay, this is a 1 year, this is a one-off, and it's going to be very difficult for them to get to the final and then win it, whoever they play. But for me, they're not going to prioritise the league now. Of course they're not. You know, you would never do that in the situation they're in. But I do hope that they can use the form to help them in the Super League rather than just putting everything into the Challenge Cup.
Yeah, I think one of the problems they have is that it's just a 2-week turnaround now, isn't it, before the Challenge Cup semi-finals come round, and so you've got one league game and that's it, then you're into the semi-finals. But I think it's just going to lift that grey cloud that's been over the club for the last month or so. I mean, you know, there's been a lot of doom and gloom around the London Broncos lately. There's been no news of signings coming in, there's the uncertainty over where they're playing next year, and for 2 weeks, instead of all of that dominating the talk about what the London Broncos are up to, for 2 weeks people are saying they're in the semi-finals of the Challenge Cup, they're 80 minutes away from Wembley. Can we get there to Wembley and maybe take 15,000 London Rugby League fans to Wembley just as they did in 1999? And you know, a lot of people think that, you know, we see maybe something that other people don't in the London Broncos, because we keep saying they're not as bad as the league form suggests, and they've been so bad in terms of their league form for so long that maybe you think, well, that may be just the triumph of optimism over experience. But you saw Kalfuzi looking a transformed player tonight in the front row. Huge hits early in the first and late in the second half, absolutely. You saw Michael Witt, I thought, have his best game for the London Broncos. You saw Jamie Soward's kicking game, just controlling that ball on a piece of string. There are things there where on a given day you have that nagging feeling in the back of the brain, and it may be from a London point of view that I'm saying this, but you have that nagging feeling in the back of the brain. They could actually beat a top side on a one-off day. They did it to Warrington last year, a result I don't think they got enough credit for, because Warrington were coming into it the week before the Challenge Cup final. When you looked at the team sheets, London had more players out through injury than Warrington did that day. You look at other performances this season that they've played maybe over 40 minutes, not over a full 80. They just need everything to go their way, and it's cup football. It's cup rugby league football now. They've got to believe they can do it. They have the talent to do it. I think the biggest problem is whether they've got the mentality to do it.
To the more orally observed of the podcast listeners, you'll probably notice we're going at a slightly quicker speed on the way home from Sheffield than what we encountered on the way up. There was a broken down car transporter which occupied 2 lanes around junction 29, or was it? 2027, which is where we were approaching on the way up. And we've just gone back past 31 on the way home, so very early in our journey, but hopefully a free run down. Interesting that in our coverage on BBC London this evening, Jamie, we had Mark Croston there, the former Broncos player, former Skolars player and coach as well, now the director of rugby there in North London. And he was chatting to you ahead of the game about the structural changes. It's something we haven't really talked about in the podcast so far. And he was saying that he thinks, regardless of what changes come in and however they decide to change the way that Super League looks from 2015 onwards, he was pretty sure there would be a London representative in the Super League in 2015.
Yeah, there was a lot of optimism about that from Mark, wasn't there? And you know, I've spoken to Gus Mackay as well tonight, and you know, some of the conversations that seem to have taken place in the last week or so, it's interesting to see where they're going to go, because I think the announcement it's going to drop down to 12 is an interesting one. It means that next year, if you look at it off the top of your head, there's going to be no promotion next year. Now, the whole thought about the licensing system was that you have 3 years, and that at the end of those 3 years, a top championship side was likely, not always guaranteed, but likely to progress to the Super League. And I just wonder, for all the people who've been saying, oh brilliant, we're now back to promotion and relegation, if that's actually got through yet, that thought that actually what this probably does mean is that there won't be any promotion at all next year unless the Super League decides to drop 3 teams down, which I can't see the Super League clubs going for. I know there was a movement from a few of the clubs to go down to 10. I don't think that's workable, but it means that for championship clubs they've now got 2 more years to wait, not just 1.
Although potentially you do have the option of this 2 12s dividing to 3 8s, which somehow softens a blow and makes the difference between the top division and the next division less, because you have the more sort of divided up, and it only gives you then one more season to rearrange where you're going to be for those clubs that are in that middle division to potentially be there. But yes, I agree. I mean, I think the danger is, isn't it? If they do bring back straight promotion relegation, okay, let's include Catalans in this. They're in a much better position at the moment. But what if Broncos or Catalans or both end up in those relegation spots? At the moment, it looks more likely that it will be Broncos, which were there. They get relegated. Can they really run in the Championship? Would they run in the Championship? Is that something they'd be interested in? I don't think that the structure and the things that they have in place now, like their development, could exist if they had a team that played in the Championship. It would completely change the landscape in London, and I don't think the RFL can afford that to happen, because the implications for the game would be massive. People might think it doesn't really mean anything, London aren't doing anything, they look at them in the Super League, they won't miss them in Super League, but we know it's much more than that. If you lose that, you lose everything that's filling in behind it, and it sets the game back so many more years, not just in London but as a whole. Because if this game wants to be seriously considered as a viable worldwide sport, a viable national sport even in our country, it has to have London in it. And that's not me being a London bias. If they want to have promotion relegation and London not be in there, then fair enough, that's the way they want to go. But that sport will not be a national sport.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by that Catalan example there, Ian, because let's say, for example, they have a terrible season next year and go down. They can't play in the Championship because Toulouse have clearly shown already it's unworkable for a French team to play in the Championship, as much as they tried to make it work. Toulouse ended up with a weaker squad possibly than sides in the French National Championship, because they ended up recruiting players who then had to say, look, I can't get the time off work. I can't actually physically travel to Sheffield or to Halifax or to Leigh or to Whitehaven every other weekend to go and play my rugby league. And at times they were getting better paid by teams in the LER. So if Catalan were to drop down, where do they drop down to? Equally, you've got Toulouse with a very strong case to be in the Super League from 2015. How would they get promoted? And you've got teams like Avignon down in France as well, who I think have made it quite clear that they want to be involved in the Super League mix as well, maybe 3 or 4 more years down the line. How would they fit into that structure? Would the league have to say then, well, maybe we take one club from the Championship and one club from the LER in France? Well, that obviously is not going to go down well with the Championship clubs, or probably the vast majority of rugby league fans in this country. So there are a lot of things to work out before I think they go for a path of straightforward relegation and promotion. Gus Mackay was making the point that you've got to look at how the youth teams are set up, the academies, how the structure of the club itself is run, what are the finances like, what are the facilities like. There may be some clubs in the Championship who think, well, actually, if you cross coast to London Welsh in the Premiership last year, they went all out for promotion, they went to court, took the RFU to court, and it's not ended well for them. They've ended up in a worse financial place than they were 12 months ago. They're now trying to make a real go of it in Oxford because they feel a loyalty to playing at the Kassam Stadium. But it's not a great example of where things could go. And you don't want to see rugby league clubs overstretching themselves and thinking that's the case. Equally, you can definitely see the argument about the merit of being in a promotion and relegation structure. I think Ben Giles made the point on Twitter tonight, seeing a game like that with something riding on it may have given a bit extra to the London Broncos performance, but it's a quandary, and if the RFL get it wrong, they'll kill the game as a national sport.
I actually think it's a really exciting time. You mentioned the developments in France as well, and if you think about where this sport could be in a few years' time if they do set motion down the right lines, I think it really is a crucial time, a really good time. And I don't necessarily think that they're not going to get everything right. Nobody ever does. You never get the right decisions right from the start. They've tried licensing. Are they going to decide that don't work? I think that elements of it do, and I don't think you can get rid of it completely, but they've obviously seen that maybe promotion and relegation does bring something to the competition. That's something that they want to bring back. Just tell me more about your interview with Gus. I mean, there's very many questions that we could all put to Gus about the future of the club, about the next round of the Challenge Cup. There was a story that potentially, if they were to draw Catalans, and this is all if, buts and whens at the moment, we don't know the draw, but they may well play it in France. I mean, did you have anything to say about potentially that, or the future of the ground? The bog standard question which you put to him every interview?
Absolutely. Well, it wasn't so forthcoming about the venue for the Challenge Cup semi-final. I mean, as you say, there are still, as we speak, 6 potential teams they could end up playing. I mean, there were rumours, and these are only on the forums at the moment, so I'm only reading what you're reading, and everybody else listening to this podcast may have read over the course of the weekend, that there were talks that if London drew Catalan, the game would be played in Perpignan. Personally, I think you've just taken 100 years of Challenge Cup history and tossed that straight out of the window.
I mean, if that was to happen, I mean, as much as, you're looking for a neutral venue, and if it was Catalans, and again, this is all if, buts and whens, but it's... You just couldn't play within the region. You have to go for a neutral venue. I don't know, is the argument that TV want a good spectacle, they want a load of people in the ground, and they look for that? Again, TV does dictate the sport, so maybe they would be able to force that through. I'm not sure, but I don't know, if they did draw Catalans and ended up playing there, you are devaluing some integrity of the competition. There is the potential that may even happen.
I think part of the problem is that whichever one of the Catalans or London gets through to the semi-finals, normally they do end up on the rough end of a scheduling decision. I mean, the number of times Catalan have had to play a semi-final up at the Lee Sports Village or in Huddersfield, 20 miles away from the team that they're playing in the semi-finals of the Challenge Cup. It's not right. It is just not right. And I can say that with a London bias, maybe, because the RFL will say, well, you could take the match to Coventry, I suppose, and get half the crowd that you would if you played it 20 miles away from where one of the teams is playing. But that doesn't make that decision right. The entire notion of the semis is that it's played on a neutral venue that both teams have an equal opportunity to go to. If there was a Catalan-London semi-final, I think one of the teams will end up being aggrieved. You have to either play the game in the southeast of England or you have to play the game in France. The only out wild card I would suggest is that Barcelona got a big crowd for a game between Catalan and Warrington a few years back, and I think they might embrace having a big occasion there. That said, that would still be very much a Catalan home game. One of the teams will end up being aggrieved. I think this is a big call for the RFL because it will almost be them saying, this is the market we're prioritising in terms of expanding the game. They're either saying that France is where they see the expansion coming from, or whether they see the southeast as being still potentially an area that they want to expand into. If they play the match in Perpignan, I think they're saying essentially, well, Catalan is where we think the game's going to grow. It will be a big nod towards Toulouse having a Super League place in a couple of years' time. Alternatively, what they have to do is clear the decks in London. They have to say, right, there's going to be no rugby league matches anywhere in the southeast that are taking place at the same time that London are playing in the semi-finals of the Challenge Cup. And you then see just how many rugby league supporters there are in London. And my feeling is, Ian, there would be quite a lot of them.
I think there would, but I'm still not sure you can play it in London. I don't think you can go to either of the regions where they are. Which, if London do draw Catalans, it's the ultimate question mark, isn't it? Really, where do you go and where do you take that game? To a neutral country, maybe. Who knows?
Switzerland.
Yeah, maybe. And with 2 weeks to market it as well, I mean, you can hardly bemoan the clubs for saying, you're only giving us, we've only got 2 weeks to plan this, so wherever we take it, you're going to be on limited resources anyway, really, because of what will happen. Jimmy, thank you for your conversation, thank you for your company today. I don't know, your final reflections on what was a long journey, a really good preview hour, a really good chat to the game, a decent game as well. We got on the radio, which was good as well, on 94.9 FM, and what looks like at the moment, fingers crossed, a nice safe journey home.
Absolutely. I think my final thought, Ian, is it was a good trip, apart from the car transporter, obviously. Hope that's not on the motorway any longer. I think the fact it wasn't the greatest game in the world, but a decent game, spoke volumes about the Broncos. I think the fact that they saw it through with no alarms is a big compliment. I think they just have to feel that wherever they go and whoever they play, they'll just have to take that mentality. They'll maybe have to take that world is against the mentality just for that one game. Get to Wembley, and London's rugby league future will feel, whether we're looking at it through London rose-tinted spectacles or not, a lot more secure.
No, and I forgot to ask as well, Gus, I'm sure, told you where the club will be next year?
No, not quite. What he did say was that they're in advanced talks with one venue. Now, I think that seems a bit more solid than we've heard from him potentially in the past. It hasn't said where it is. I think we all have our ideas about where that might be. We're still awaiting an announcement. Interestingly, though, he did admit this is having an effect on player recruitment because they can't market the club, they can't brand the club to players until they know that now. So potentially, given they've got a fortnight now of positive press coming up for them, some nice things being written about them, who knows, maybe we'll see an announcement by the semi-final.
Well, Jamie, always good to have your company. You may well get a nice gig for the semi-finals as well. Thanks for joining us on Rugby League Down South.
No worries.
Plenty discussion there then with Jamie Hill on Twitter after the game. I said Broncos did a job. Not flashy, but worthy winners. 29 points to 10. Credit to Sheffield. They kept coming, but coughed up possession too much, really. Katie replying, saying it's a fair evaluation. A win's a win at the end of the day. One step closer to Wembley than we were, no matter how it happened. And Steve saying the job's not finished yet. Hashtag 80 minutes to Wembley. If you want to get in touch on Twitter, at Ian Ramsdale, any point during the week. In fact, let's hear from Gus Mackay, shall we, and his interview with Jamie at the end of the game on Friday night.
We know where we are. I think if there was 14, I'd still be happy with 14 because I think that keeps us in. What this does do is it refocuses and makes you think about where you're going to be and makes you want to be in that 12. So I think one of the things that we're pushing for, and I know other clubs are, is that there has to be a fair process of how you get to that final 12. And the areas that need to be considered is obviously the finance of a club, the performance on the field, and your youth performance in your facilities. And those 4 areas I think have to be taken into consideration, because then it's fair for everyone, because you could have a situation where, injuries or whatever, you could finish 13th and not be in the 12 the following year. So, we're very mindful of that, and we'll see what comes of the final structure.
Would you say as a result of that, Gus, therefore, that you don't expect it to be straight promotion and relegation to the Super League from 2014?
Well, that's what's going to be discussed now. Those are the sort of nuts and bolts and the final detail that's going through. I suppose us saying that is we're protecting the London position, because I think and we think it's very important that Super League is in London, as I'm sure a lot of people in the game do. And I think all the work that's gone on with our youth development and investment needs to be thought of as well. But it's going to be tough.
You've said that in the past, that you can't see a future really for the London Broncos if they fall outside that Super League structure. Do you still feel that's the case with the 12-team Super League?
Yeah, look, we'll be doing everything and fighting to do it. I suppose what it does do is it gives you, promotion and relegation does give, if you're not in it, does give you a bite to come back into it. But what we need to ensure is that we protect our brand, protect our youngsters coming through. Half of our squad is London kids, which is brilliant. So we want them to be playing Super League.
And how much of a relief, almost in a way, Gus, is it that for the next fortnight the headlines for the Broncos are going to be largely positive ones, looking forward to a semi-final? It's
great, and we've got to build on that as a club and take things forward, and step by step, and hopefully the next game we can get through that and be where we'd like to be. So.
One last thing, Gus, and I expect a straight bat to be played to this one. Obviously, there's still a lot of speculation about the home for the London Broncos next season. Is there anything you can tell us about that?
No, there's not, and I think, I won't give you the straight bat, but what I will say is that, we are in discussions with a venue where, hopefully we can get something out of it, because it is important that we nail that down as soon as possible, and, it has dragged on, and, there's a focus on getting that done as soon as possible, but it's not as straightforward as everyone thinks.
And does that have an effect, Gus, on whether you can bring players in for next season, the fact that there is that uncertainty still about that?
Yeah, you want to be selling the club and where you are and all the rest of it, so we've got an idea of what we want to do, and once we're in a position to do that, then we will do.
It's been a busy week for myself on Twitter. Plenty comments about numerous topics, more of which we'll get onto a little later on. But on the subject of the structural changes, quite a few comments I had. Rob at Ian Ramsdale said, I'd place all my chips on them being relegated next year. Not so sure what'll happen after that. Steve says if the Broncos went down, they wouldn't come back. Crowds would drop even lower than current levels, in his opinion. Jack Howison, in fact, currently, he had to retire, didn't he, from the Sheffield Eagles squad for this year. Former Hemel Stags man, has been the club captain at Hemel for the last number of years, for a long time really. Was involved running the water, in fact, on Friday night at Sheffield. But he was on Twitter saying how many London-born players were in the squad in 2005 compared to now. Depends on the definition of success in terms of whether you deem the London experiment, as people call it, to be a success. And Michael saying licensing is the only reason why we're still in Super League and have youth development. Take that away and we will die. And a colleague, Phil Parry, of mine, said promotion relegation will only work if the second flight is strong enough and the gap isn't too great, which maybe is an argument for the 3 lots of 8 split halfway through the season, potentially. And Pedro's saying London Broncos have had long enough in the top flight at the expense of clubs such as Leigh, Halifax, Featherstone, etc. Interesting. If you have any thoughts or comments during the week, you can tweet at Ian Ramsdale anytime you like, or you can email rldownsouth@gmail.com. Now, still to come, we'll hear from the Skolars head coach ahead of the Northern Rail Bowl final. We'll also hear from the author of a book called No Helmets Required. But first, well, there's no way to say it really, a London Rugby League legend. You either know or you don't know of Steele Retchless. If you do, he needs no introduction to you. If you don't, I'd pump his name into Google. You'll learn a lot. A vital part of the Broncos Cup Final side of 1999. A key part of the team playing for the club for a few years back then. And one monster of a player. That is an understatement, really. And one of the greatest names really has ever been seen, Steele Retchless, isn't it? But with Broncos launching a new Twitter hashtag, the hashtag Spirit of 99, and with everyone about to start talking about that cup run in 1999, where they played in the final at Wembley but lost to Leeds, well, I thought I'd do exactly the same. And he is on speed dial, isn't he? So I gave him a call. Here is Steele Retchless.
Oh, it's great, Ian. I spoke with Tony Ray leading up to the game, and a lot of excitement around the club going into the final 8, and I asked him to send me the result as soon as he got it, and he texted through to me, and I think it's great for the club. Probably not in a strong position, obviously, in the league, but this is certainly a way that they can make up for what's been lost already this season in the league.
It sounds like you keep up to date with sort of what the Broncos are doing from afar now living back down under, but how tough do you think things will be against Wigan?
Oh, look, I won't sugarcoat it. It's certainly going to be a tough ask to go away and play. They're in great form. It's had a good win against Widnes on Monday night. But look, that's the beauty of Challenge Cup, isn't it? A lot of fairy tales have been written in the past. Our semi-final win against Castleford, where we went in rank outsiders, and the year before when probably no one gave Sheffield a chance to beat a really strong Wigan side. So that's the beauty of the Cup. As I said, it's proved there's been a lot of upsets in the past, and they go in and with obviously a little bit of an understrength squad, but fingers crossed they can get the job done.
How do you think that the club's current position and sort of feeling compares to where the club were back in 99 when you made it through to the final? Are the club in a better position, a worse position, a similar position?
Looking at it from afar, there's some a little bit of unrest here over there, some players not knowing what's going on, possibility of moving grounds again. Sure, that could be in the back of their mind, but as I alluded to before, if they can get that out of their minds and focus on this game as a big opportunity to do something positive at the back end of the season, then I think it'll do great things for the club.
One of the new signings, Jamie Soward, he's obviously come from the NRL. You've seen a bit of him down there, have you?
Yeah, certainly. He's a very skillful player, Jamie. He's played Origin, so I think he'll fit in really well with the team for the rest of the year. I think it's a pretty good pick-up from the club. I saw an interview that he did on Sky to say that rather than play reserve grade in Sydney, he thought that it would be better for him to finish the season over in Super League, and I agree with him. The competition has certainly improved since I was there and left in 2004. I think the competition's a lot stronger, a lot of good young English players coming through, and the Burgess boys are proof of that over here. Everyone's talking about them and how they're going to strengthen the English side when they come up against Australia and New Zealand next time. So, look, I think Jamie is probably a key for the guys. If he can bring a little bit of spark and motivation to them and get them going, and they can play off the back of him, then anything can happen. But as we know in these games, as long as he's got a good forward pack going forward, he'll be able to hopefully work his magic.
And Jamie said as well, you know, the main reason that he's over here is to do something with this club in the Challenge Cup. It was a big draw for him. It's a big draw for the players, and I'm sure that the Challenge Cup does have a special place in your heart as well.
Oh, definitely. When I look back at my time over there, it was fantastic. 98, we got close, got knocked out by Wigan in the semi-finals up in Huddersfield, and then I was so certainly lucky enough to get another crack at it the following year, and to go to Wembley was just such a great experience. I think I've told the story before to people. I grew up over here, and you'd get up early on a Sunday morning and turn Channel 9 on, and they would have the Challenge Cup on, and there'd be a sprinkling of Aussies through there, the likes of Peter Sterling, Brett Kenny, Paul Vaughton. There was definitely interest from over here, and it's just a magical time of year when the Cup comes round.
You're a big name in terms of London Rugby League and the history. Have you been involved, or have you been asked to do anything for the current squad to sort of motivate them for this year's competition?
Yeah, I got a message from Tony Ray to ask me if I could put together a little video message, just a quick one. So I did that for him, and I think he showed it to the guys leading up to the game, and I just wanted to help out in any way I could. Probably half the squad were probably only young guys when I was over there. So look, I was really stoked that he actually asked me to do that, and if it in any way helped them to get through, I'm more than happy.
Unfortunately, in '99, Broncos didn't win. They lost the final. How big would it have been to win that in terms of the development of the game and what it would have done for London? You know how rugby league is seen in the area. How big would it have been back then, and how big would it be this year if they can get to the final or even win it?
It's a pretty hard question, Ian. To sort of gaze into a crystal ball and seeing what would have happened. I would have hoped that if we had have taken it out in '99, that there would have been a real surge of in that grassroots level wanting to look up to us and wanting to play for London. Unfortunately, it wasn't to be. But I think it'll give the club a real boost if they can make their way through to the final this year. And as I said, I really hope that they can, and it'll give them the impetus to finish off the year on a high note.
And what are your particular memories of '99? Is it a happy memory, or is it a bit of a sad memory because, unfortunately, the side didn't win?
A bit of both, really. As I said, to play in a Challenge Cup final in only my second season over there was such a great honour, and I know there's a lot of great players English players who've played the game over there and never got a chance to make it. The other thing that really stands out, it was the last game at the old Wembley, as it was before it went through its transformation into the state-of-the-art facility it is now. But happy times too. I mean, the amount of fans we got there and the noise they made just made it such a special time. Obviously on the wrong end of the ledger on the day, but great memories of a really great time when I was in London.
It's quite a vibrant and popular time for the club in those days as well. Where do you think the sport compares? I know that you're observing from afar and you're not involved in it, but from what you see, do you think the sport is progressing? Has it progressed from your time, or are we looking at a similar situation now as to how it was?
I think rugby league in London will always be the younger brother. It's with football and rugby, probably the two codes that are above it. But what I love about where the club's heading now is seeing the development of the younger London players coming through. I watched a little bit of footage of the under-19s, some highlights of some of the games that they played, and I was really impressed with some of the young lads that are running around down there. They look really good. So I'm really hoping that the club can hang on to these guys and help develop them. That'll be very healthy for the game down there. But brutally honest, we would need success. Success will hopefully bring the crowds through, and obviously we're not sitting where we'd like to be on the bottom of the table, but going forward, if we can improve next year and bring these young guys through and build that grassroots level, then I think the game can still have a healthy foothold in London.
And I know that it may not be purposeful or it may be accidental, but you refer to the club as we. You still feel part of it, and I guess many people do when they've been in that London Rugby League circle. It's very difficult to put it down.
Well, it is, Ian. I spent 7 seasons over there, and it's the most time I've spent at any club. So, yeah, definitely it's we, not them. I still class myself. I'm a London Broncos old boy through and through, and I always will be. So, as I said, I keep an eye on how they're going, and when they're not doing well, you definitely feel for them. And I would like more than nothing for them to cause an upset in a fortnight's time and go through to the final.
Might we see you over here if they make the final?
I would love to come back. I've got a lot of great friends that I made in my time over there, and fingers crossed, you never know if Dave or Tony are listening to the interview, then who knows? I might find myself over there for a couple of days to catch up with a few people.
I'm sure people would love to see you as well. Just tell us what you're up to at the moment. You obviously still keep your eye on the rugby, but I think you got a few fingers in other pies as well.
So when I came back and played for a few years, retired in 97? No, end of 96 I retired.
96 or 2006?
Oh, sorry. Oh, well, I was still playing that.
Yeah, of course.
2006, I should say. I was going to say. With playing in the Queensland Cup over here at Eastern Suburbs Tigers. Did a little bit of coaching for a couple of years at East and finished up there in 2009. So really, I'm mainly these days a spectator of the game. Still love watching it. But yeah, more looking from afar, as we've alluded to, and a spectator these days.
You got a couple of other businesses though, I think, haven't you?
No, I actually work for Yalumba Wines, which is Australia's oldest family-owned winery. I started with them as soon as I got back from London. So I've been with them nearly 10 years now. So time has certainly flown, and enjoying a few glasses of good red wine. And really enjoying life at the moment.
And if you were involved in this current London Broncos side now, and you're going into this Challenge Cup semi-final, as you say, it's going to be difficult against Wigan, what would you be saying in the dressing room to them before the game? What would you be saying to them to try and make them improve their game from what we've seen in the league this year to get them to put in a performance in the Cup?
I think I'd probably pull out a cliche comment like, don't leave anything in the dressing room. Just go out there, leave it all out on the pitch, give everything you've got, every last bit of effort you can. This is your chance to get to the Challenge Cup. It's a great time if you're involved in that final. So go out there and give it everything.
Always good to catch up with Steele from his home down under. I drew him away from I think a dinner or an evening he was out at, and it was always good to chat to him, and he gives his honest opinion, doesn't he? And it would be great to see him over here if the side make it to Wembley, as he says, and everyone knows it's going to be tough, isn't it? A fixture against Wigan. Plenty of comments, in fact, about the decision to host that semi-final in Leigh, 8 miles from Wigan, 200 miles from London. Not potentially neutral, is it? We'll do more on that next week in the programme, or maybe in 2 weeks. I'm thinking I might do an extra special programme next week. We'll record bits of it as we follow Skolars up to the Northern Rail Bowl final on Saturday, and also we'll do a little bit of maybe some reaction to some particular news about Tony Clubb, which we'll talk about in just a second, and also a bit of a preview to the Challenge Cup semi-final as well. Talking of that news from Clubby, a big story this week. Tony Clubb, Broncos captain. He says he's asked the club to release him from his contract. He's got a year to run. He finishes in 2014. It's an interview which he did for 4020 magazine, which was also part of a Boots and All feature they did on Sky last week. If you've not seen it, do a web search and you'll find out all the details. Basically, Clubby's saying he can't achieve what he wants to do. He's sick of losing, and he wants to leave. Not throwing his toys out the pram, but just not happy with how things are. But it gives you an insight into maybe the feeling behind the club, which is not great reading, really. It doesn't paint a great picture about the club. I had loads of comments on Twitter. I was literally inundated, is that the word? I had a lot, put it that way. Here are a few of them. Howard saying, let him go. You don't want someone that toxic in the changing room. He won't have done himself any favours unless he's got another club lined up. He may get the tag of troublemaker. From what I understand, there has been interest in Tony Clubb, and maybe that's potentially why, for me, it looks like he's trying to force his way out, trying to upset the apple cart so he can be released from his contract and maybe go on this new deal. I don't think he'd have done what he's done if he didn't have something lined up, you'd have thought. John says absolutely no issue with him saying this. He's gone above and beyond for London RL enough times. Rick, ambitions is admirable, he says, at Ian Ramsdale on Twitter. However, a captain walking because he doesn't like losing would be a turn-off for other coaches. Carl says he's been a good servant, but being released only perpetuates the problem. If London got a fee for him, maybe they could strengthen. Sussex Merlins on Twitter saying spent most of the last 2 years injured as Tony Clubb. The PR of what he's done is a bigger issue than him actually leaving, and Downing agreeing, saying a fit and healthy club is a bigger loss than an injured one. But look on the bright side, it's got the club plenty of coverage. It certainly did. There's plenty of articles out there for you to read the comments. Simon also on Twitter at Ian Ramsdale said, good for him. I've been going to the Broncos since 97. It's not much fun anymore, and I don't see things improving anytime soon, which is a worry. And one of my former colleagues, Lawrence Morra, on Twitter, saying, for what it's worth, I thought his comments were quite brave and shows that he really cares. But tough time for Broncos. And Ashley saying, smacks more of kicking the club while they're down. Sadly, can't have done team morale any good, surely. And a couple of other fans saying as well, and regardless of the situation at Broncos, he should not have made these thoughts public. He's let his teammates, fans and David Hughes down. Get rid of him, she says. And Ian Horrocks saying he's gone from scoring 3 for England, in fact I think he scored 4, didn't he, in that game down under, to winning 4 or 5 games a season. So I don't blame him. You only have one shot at life. Get your comments in this week. We'll have more discussion on that next week in the programme. I just literally ran out of time to get things in this week. We got so much to squeeze in. And so, let's move on to the Skolars, because talking of potential silverware for the Broncos, Skolars playing the Northern Rail Bowl final this weekend, facing the North Wales Crusaders, who are of course top of Championship 1. Both of these two clubs facing this game because they finished top of the group stages of the competition earlier this season, didn't get through to the final of the competition itself. You'd never have thought they would, but going up against the sides from the division above them. But Skolars currently unbeaten in 4, had a bit of a wavy start, didn't they, to the Championship 1 season, having been, well, amazing in the group stages of the Northern Rail Cup. But they have lost once to North Wales this season, but maybe things now back on track. I had a really good chat, in fact, with their head coach, Joe Mbu. He's also come out fighting for the Broncos as well. Really interesting stuff here, but of course, a weekend that everyone at the club is looking forward to.
Yes, certainly. It's the first for the club, and it's first for me as a coach, and it's great. You know, it's a great opportunity for everyone that be involved, and it's a great opportunity for the club as well, and for the players to create a bit of history.
It's a tough game, isn't it? North Wales Crusaders. They've done well so far. They're not unbeatable. We've seen that. What sort of prospects and opposition do they pose?
Well, they certainly have shown themselves to be a strong team this year, and they've recruited well. And I think, always at the start of the season, usually you get the opportunity, you get that window to bring in the players that you want and the players that bring in and make an impact to your team. And they've certainly recruited well in the last of players that they've brought in, and they've been they're well coached, well drilled, and I think if you want to play against anyone in the final, I guess the ideal team to play against, because you want to match yourself and play against a good competitive team.
How do you go about beating them?
It's a difficult question, but I think the main thing is it's not about beating or winning a game. It's about playing to the best of our ability, and we know when we play the best of our ability, we're good enough to beat anyone. And so the answer to the question is, let's not go out there to beat them. Let's go out there to play as best we can. And I'm sure they would want us. They would want to beat the best Skolars team, and then it's our role for us to be there as best we can. And also, they would want to lose against a good Skolars team. So it's a case of us being at our best, and I'm sure that'll be enough for us to win. And if it's not enough for the day, at least that we can go away and walk away and say we were at our best, and our best wasn't enough on this day.
How much pressure are you and the squad under to win on Saturday?
There is no pressure, and I think I've been really happy with the squad and with the attitude and with the maturity that the squad have shown. The atmosphere around the team and everyone else around, it's another game. It's another game where we need to be 100%. It's another game where we need to be at our best. And I've been really happy with the build-up, and the boys have not shown any signs of frustration or nerves or pressure. It's just been everyone. We came in and we trained well this week, and we trained hard. And it's been a regular week for us. We worked hard, and as we do every week, and we're just looking forward to the weekend game. And that's the approach that we've had, and that's what has really impressed me with the lads, and I'm really happy with at the moment with the squad.
You had great form as well in the Northern Rail Cup group stages earlier on this year. It was a bit of a shaky start maybe to the Championship 1 campaign, but things seem to be much more on track now with, 4 straight wins. You've got a side in good form.
No, definitely. I think, I think when we had the good start, we had the likes of Oscar Thomas was playing for us on a regular basis, and when he got injured and we brought Andy in, and it took Andy a while for him to get around and to be to link up with Dylan again, and after last season, and there's certain pivotal positions. Once you lose certain players in that position, it takes a team a while to get used to someone else coming in and taking charge and manoeuvring, and even the games we lost, there's probably 2 games where I felt we weren't in a game, and that was one of them being a Crusaders game. But again, the same game, we had quite a few players missing. We had Joe Price with Buck in his hand. So, early in the season, we had a few players kind of with low injuries, and they were in and out, and so it really made it difficult for us to get some consistency in our performance, consistency in the team. Now I think we've had that, because we've had that consistency. We've been doing what we've been doing.
What will be the big motivation behind the side on Saturday to win? You've been involved in the London Rugby League setup for a number of years. The Skolars are still developing. What is the motivation for your squad to go out there and win on Saturday?
I think the motivation should, is that, I'm not quite sure where the Broncos stand on Silverware, but we'll probably be in the professional game to bring in some Silverware down to the south, and I think that in itself will be a great achievement if we can do that. If we bring a major competition Silverware back in the south, and I think for that it will be a great motivation for the lads in London. And at the moment, London, including Broncos, there's a lot of sticks coming our way from up there, or down there, however you want to see it, and I just feel that the game in itself is progressing, and people are working hard, and people want to make this place a stronghold for rugby, but we're not feeling that we get a fair crack of the whip, really.
What did you say? There's a couple of sticks being thrown at you from certain places. What do you mean by that?
No, well, I'm not elaborating anymore on that. But the main thing I feel that, you know, as rugby league in South, I don't feel we're getting a fair crack of the whip in terms of, you know, what's being said out there. You know, in terms of the game developing here. I think, you know, people working hard and the game is slowly developing down here, and the teams are getting better. The likes of them are coming in and doing what they're doing just shows, you know, the level of rugby development that has been done here, and the likes of us being here, you know, it just shows, you know, what the staff in itself has got to offer, and I believe, you know, give it a bit more time, you know, the likes of Broncos and ourselves and the Hemel and everyone else closer to the South, even Oxford, you know, they'll keep growing and they'll become, you know, big, strong teams in whatever division they find themselves.
Does it irk you that when these conversations about, you know, restructuring the competition, immediately people say, you know, get rid of Broncos, get rid of London, that they're not doing well, they don't deserve to be there?
And this is precisely what I mean. And the people that are talking about getting rid of Broncos, I think they need to spend some time in the South. And when I'm talking about time in the South, not spend a week or 2 weeks. I'll spend almost 2 seasons up north, and the experience that I've got over there, and the environment that I live over there is here. We've got that in the South, and Broncos definitely have what it takes to be a Super League team. Now there's many you know, Super League teams in the North that have struggled in the past, and yet they're still the Super League. So I feel again, I feel it's a bit wrong for those who are saying that the Broncos shouldn't be a Super League, or when we restructure, they shouldn't be a London team in Super League. It's a bit wrong because, you know, same thing can be said of a few clubs that, you know, we can say there's too many Super League teams around one area, if you like, or whatever. But, you know, there's all sorts of arguments. I just feel people just need to value if the game needs to progress, and they need to understand that South, you know, having a professional 1 or 2, 3 professional teams in the South will help with selection and will help bringing in better quality players and potentially even making England, you know, as strong as we can make it. You know, if we've got bigger pull to bring to pick players from.
And you've got potential to win silverware this weekend. They're still in the hunt in the Challenge Cup. A semi-final for them now, as tough as it'll be, you know, playing Wigan, what is technically an away game, I think you could say, in League. But how big, you know, people talk about the impact of, you know, possibly being in the final and how much that would help the Broncos in their development. How big would it be for you if you were to win the Northern Rail Bowl at the weekend? You know, would it be this big, that, you know, would it really be a big boost, or would it just be the next step?
No, I think it just be the next step for us. For us, we've got eyes firmly in the league, and we know as a club and as a team we've got a lot to do in the league, and you know, we know we've got some tough games ahead of us in August, and we know we've got to be at our best really in July and August, and we've got, after this final, we'll be strongly fixed on Gloucester, and we know that, you know, they came down here and it wasn't an easy day for us. They made it hard, and you know, they're a compromising team, they're a good team, you know, they're well drilled and well coached, and on the day we just, you know, got the best of them in the second half, but the first half could have been anyone's game. So we know we've got a lot to do. So for us winning the final will just be another step. But our eyes are firmly set into the competition, the championship competition, and doing the best we can in this competition, and hopefully finishing as high as we can. But we know we're going to come against some tough oppositions in the next 6 weeks.
And Joe, I usually ask you a question about sort of how you feel personally. You usually sort of fend it off, you know, and talk about, you know, other things in terms of the club. But how do you feel in the fact of, you know, you'll be taking this side into, you know, a bowl final at the weekend with the possibility of winning some silverware? I started off by saying, you know, you're fairly early in your coaching career, so you personally must be happy with how things are going at the moment.
No, definitely, I'm definitely happy. But with me, what usually tends to happen, I usually tend to think about certain achievement after they've gone some time, you know. So at the moment, I'm just riding with the wave, if you like, and I'm just going with the flow and doing the best I can every week, and doing the, you know, trying to achieve what I can achieve in the time that I've got. But you know, in terms of achievement, I don't think too much about it. All I think about is again being successful whilst I'm doing what I'm doing at the moment.
That's Joe Mbu, the Skolars head coach. Interesting stuff from him, and he obviously is still very passionate. Of course he is. He's a head coach of a London side, but still really wants the sport to continue. And you get the feeling, you know, they're of course going to be affected, and there'll be an impact on them if Broncos were to drop out of Super League. Even with Broncos having a naff season like they are, you've got to think, you know, they're having it tough. And as he says, you know, sticks being thrown at them. You know, metaphorical sticks, obviously, but it's difficult. It must be difficult for them, and I'm sure they're wanting Broncos to be more successful, and you know, I'm sure they'll do all they can to help any potential developments of the future. But good luck to Joe and the side on Saturday. I'm there doing the game for Premier Sports. Should be a cracking encounter. It's gonna be tough. North Wales are an amazing side. It would be amazing if Skolars could win this final. I think I'm pretty favouring the North Wales Crusaders, but I think Skolars will give them an almighty close run, and it could well go down to the final 10-15 minutes, and you never know. If it gets that far, Skolars are in with a shout, as much as North Wales Crusaders would be as well. I posted on Twitter, in fact, after I'd spoken to Joe, saying he'd strongly come out in support of the Broncos maintaining their place in Super League. And John saying it's not just the future of Broncos, is it, that's at stake? Rugby League in the capital in total. If you fancy your comments, as ever, as I say, at Ian Ramsdale or on Twitter, at Ian Ramsdale, in fact, on Twitter, or rldownsouth@gmail.com is the email address to send me your more considered view. And talking of finals as well, I promised I'd mention the London Rugby League Cup Finals, which are happening this weekend. I've been talking to Cameron Paul from the South West London Chargers. I'm just diving into my phone here to update you on the message that he sent me about the event that's going on. In fact, I should really add my congratulations. He had his other half had a baby boy earlier this week, so he became a dad, so congratulations on that. But two curtain raisers now, the Chargers versus Southend and Thames Ditton versus St Albans A, 12 o'clock and 1:30 respectively on Saturday, so it's the day of the Skolars Northern Rail Bowl final. They have the Shield final at 2 o'clock for the London Rugby League Challenge Cup, I think it is. 2:30 Hammersmith Hills Hoist versus Beckenham Bears. And the Cup final at 4 is the South West London Chargers versus Staines Titans. So if you're free this weekend, it's down in Chiswick. Check out the if you have a look on Twitter or have a look online or have a look on do a search for the South West London Chargers, you'll see all the details. There's plenty of information there available for you. But this weekend, plenty games there, 12, 1:30, 2:30 and 4, if you can get down there this weekend to support London Rugby League. Maybe if you're not going to Halifax for the Northern Rail Bowl final like I am. And finally on the programme this week, it's been a long one, hasn't it? Thanks for sticking with it so far. Something a little different. It's not often that we do a book review, is it? In fact, I say it's not often. We've never done it before. But this is a book called No Helmets Required. There is as well a link to London Rugby League, and not just in the author, Gavin Willacy, a man who's done a lot for the London Rugby League scene, particularly in North London as well, connected to the London Skolars. A man who, if you read into what he's done, you'll be rather impressed, I'm sure, if you don't know of Gavin Willacy so far. But he's written a book now, and I'll let him explain it all, because, to be fair, when I first met him to discuss the book, I hadn't received my copy. I gave it a quick flick through, and he gave me a quick rundown, but I'll let him explain what the book's all about. A really interesting tale. You'll hear about the connections with London Rugby League again a little further into the interview, and maybe more of this sort of stuff for the future as well. I was intending to do a couple of feature interviews with people, so maybe we'll do more of this in the future. But here he is, Gavin Willacy, the author of No Helmets Required, telling you all about this book, which is recently out.
The book is about a guy called Mike Dimitro, who was an American in the 1950s. He'd just finished playing American football and had been a bit of a star in college football in Los Angeles. And anyone who knows about sport in the States knows that when you finish as a college player, unless you turn pro, that's it. That's the end of your career. So he wanted to fill the gap that playing had left. And he set up a team, or wanted to set up a team that he would take and play exhibition games. Basically, he wanted to be involved in sport and make money. He tried to take a team to Canada to play American football, and that all fell flat. So he remembered a time when he'd been to Sydney during the war and watched rugby league and thought, I love that game, that looked fantastic, maybe there's an opportunity there. And he managed to get together a team of American college football players and persuade them that it would be a good idea to spend their summer holidays going to Australia and New Zealand to play the best rugby league teams in the world. And the story is what happened to them before, during and after that trip.
And this was just a one-off trip, a one-off tour?
Yeah, it happened through the summer of 1953, so 60 years ago now. As this week they were in Brisbane, 60 years ago. And then he came back from that tour at the end of September and got together another team with only 2 or 3 of the same players to go to France for Christmas and New Year of 53-54. Then, as you'll read in the book, it ended up that was it. It all fell apart.
I was going to say, you sort of think, it's only one tour and it was only a one-off, but we've just been talking before we started the interview. It was kind of much more than just your average tour, wasn't it?
Yes, it was crazy. The things that went on the pitch, the fact that a group of American football players they'd never even seen rugby league, none of them had seen it, most of them hadn't heard of it, and he didn't even tell them that it was rugby league, not rugby union, until they got to Australia, because they didn't know the difference. He just said it's rugby, and they got rule books and read the rule books on the way over, and then they had to play against the best players in the world in front of huge crowds, and remarkably some of them succeeded. And then off the pitch, they ended up in fights, they had court cases, they were done for fraud, they had a lot of fun with the women of Australia and New Zealand, as you might imagine, post-war Californian suntanned young hunks who had seen as heroes in Australia because they'd saved them from the Japanese in the war, and they took full advantage of that and had a whale of a time, and hopefully I tell some of that story.
I was going to say, how did you find all this information? Because you flick through the book as well, and it's not... I've never seen a book like it, really. All the, the photographs that you've had scanned in, you've got handwritten letters from various people, almost like receipts and loads of documentation. How did you get your hands on all this stuff? Because it must have, like you say, it was, 60 years ago now, so this stuff can't have been easy to find.
No, well, strangely, it came in 2 parts, really. I've been working on it for the best part of 11 years.
Wow.
Yes, I'm sad to admit that. My wife would be mortified that the world now knows that. But when I was in America on a trip around there 10 years ago, I started to do some research on it and got more and more into the story. I looked up one of the players' names, found out that he was recently deceased, Gary Kokorian, and ended up going to meet his family, and they put me in touch with some other players, so I went to see them all around California, and from there I got the bug. And so when we went to Australia and New Zealand, I went into the libraries in the places that they'd played, and I printed off all the newspaper reports. And so I thought I had my book done about 5 years ago. I was there pretty much finished, and then the daughter of the protagonist, Mike Dimitro, suddenly got in touch out of the blue. She hadn't returned my previous emails, and she said, I've got some stuff for you. Do I want it? I said, of course. And remarkably, a box that was about 3 foot high and 3 foot wide turned up full of mementos, memorabilia, tons and tons of stuff that's now in the book, and I pretty much had to start again. But all that made the book what it is now. The photos, the handwritten letters, and just the incredibly personal items that gives it the flavour that it's got.
How did you go about sort of getting all that information then into a book? Because like you say, if you had a box full, you've got so much there at your fingertips, really. I mean, first of all, it must have been a big logistical task going through it and figuring out what was relevant, what wasn't, what was interesting and what wasn't, and then you've got to try and dig out those bits, put it into some sort of, I guess, chronological order, even if just in your head, for you then to be able to sort of write the book from that.
Yeah, that's why it took 10 years. The chronological order I'd already got from how I'd written the first sort of draft, and then I had...
This was just extra information, was it, to flesh it out?
Yeah, and I had the illustrations, the photographs, things like tickets from the Folies Bergère in Paris when they went to France, and nightclub things from Sydney, match receipts, proof of how much money they actually took away with them, but primarily it was adding to what I already had. But there were quite a few instances where what was believed to have happened hadn't happened, and I learnt the truth about a lot of things, and I had to rewrite some issues. I think things hadn't happened as had been reported at the time, because I got the true stories from the letters between various people involved, and also a lot of gaps were filled. Finding out there was one player on the France tour that nobody knew who it was, and that took me most of 10 years to find out who that guy was, and I managed to do it right by the end.
I must admit, I've only just managed to land my hand on a copy of the book, so I haven't read it yet, but just give us one of the little stories, maybe, one of the nice little stories in the book, or something that happened on the tour that you can maybe give away without giving too much about the story away.
Okay, well, one of the items that was in the box that I got from Michel Dimitro was a poster, a billboard, like a newspaper bill poster, about Mike Dimitro being arrested, and it turned out that he was actually boarding the plane from Australia to New Zealand on the second part of the tour, and they hadn't paid their bills. They'd got a load of hire cars they hadn't paid for, and a load of suits they'd bought and not paid for, and they'd been pursued all through Australia for this money, hadn't paid it, fobbed off the companies after them, and were about to head off out of the country, never to be seen again. And the police actually raided the plane, dragged them off and took them into court to get them to pay the bill. Mike Dimitro said, of course, he'd given the money to the New South Wales Rugby League to pay the bill, and they just hadn't done it. But I'm sure that wasn't true. But there are a lot of instances like that.
And I know that it's only kind of a coincidence, but you read on the inside that the first ever USA qualification side, for the Rugby League World Cup, for this year, the upcoming Rugby League World Cup at the end of the year, 60 years on. As much as it's a coincidence, I guess it's a timely coincidence in that that they're here. I mean, did this story, did what they do have any bearing, any impact on the current state of rugby league in America? Because I know there are a few clubs. I mean, any relation there or not at all?
No, there's none at all. But what was interesting is that originally this story, I was going to do a book about American Rugby League, the whole history of it, and this was going to be one part of it. But the more I found out about this story, I thought, no, this deserves a book in itself. And in fact, the last couple of chapters of the book are about Mike Dimitro's repeated attempts to launch rugby league in America and why he failed, primarily because he was not entirely straight character with people, but secondly, he never had the money that was required. I've mentioned off microphone to you that in fact he had persuaded the governing bodies of every major playing country in 1970 to take the World Cup to America. All he had to do was put money in the bank, and the World Cup would have been played in the States in 1970. I've got the letters to prove it, and I think that would have been potentially a turning point in the game. Rugby league may well have taken off in the States if that had happened. Instead, it took another 30 years of individuals trying to make it work over there, and it's still very much a cottage industry in the States. But it is just a coincidence that 60 years on from the All-Stars touring, that the American team are finally in the World Cup. I can't claim any connection between the two.
And you are an avid listener, an avid fan of rugby league down south, and I thank you for that personally. But there is also a connection, isn't there? Or I don't know how tenuous you're about to tell us now, but a connection between sort of your story, the book, and rugby league down south.
Yes, there is one connection. Apart from the fact that the publishers, Pitch Publishing, are in Brighton in Sussex. One of the players, the All-Stars players, was called Vince Jones, and he was a very bright fellow. I went to interview him actually in California, and he told me the whole story of how he was able to go on the tour because he'd graduated from university, and he was waiting to take up his place as a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford University in the following September, as soon as the tour finished. So he went off to Oxford after the tour, and he was immediately told him he was a rugby player, and he said, I've just been on a tour playing rugby league all around Australia. I've played against New South Wales, I've played against Queensland and Auckland, Wellington and New Zealand. Is that a problem? And the president of the Oxford Union, University Rugby Union, his dad was president of the RFU, I believe, and they said, were you paid for playing? And he said, well, not as much as we were supposed to be. And he said, does anyone else know about it? He said, no, I haven't told anyone. And he said, oh, in which case, don't worry about it. We'll wipe it under the carpet. And Vince Jones ended up playing for Oxford University in the varsity match at Twickenham, and he's in the records there. And Vince actually went over to Twickenham a few years ago, went to the Rugby Museum there, and they said that he was probably the only player to have played rugby league, rugby union and American football to that higher level.
I remember reading that story, in fact, just before the varsity this year, it re-emerged. So, no, Gavin, thank you for that. No helmets required then. The remarkable story of the American All-Stars by Gavin Willacy. I guess if people search online for it, they'll find it, and they'll be able to buy it online, buy it in stores as well.
It's on a very well-known retail online site.
You mention it. This isn't the BBC, Gavin's fine.
It is on Amazon. No helmets required. We're also going to be in WH Smiths, most WH Smiths, and Waterstones, and you can also look at us on Twitter /NoHelmetsRec or REQ, and on Facebook No Helmets Required Book.
And that's it then for London Rugby League for this week. I won't ramble on too much because this podcast has been long enough. But thank you for bearing with us this far. Congratulations if you have got this far. And let me just say, keep listening for a second or two. You might find something extra special in a second. But yes, thank you for listening. Maybe a quick special programme next week, which we'll do in conjunction with Skolars going to the bowl final, a bit of reaction to that and a bit of preview as well to the Challenge Cup semi-final for London Broncos. So maybe that'll be a special one for you next week. Of course, it's now a fortnightly programme, isn't it? So, and as I talk about not rambling on for too long, here I am doing exactly that. So please join me, subscribe, download, tell your friends, and your friends' friends. Yeah, I'm going. All right, thanks for listening.
And I just want to tag on a couple of extra questions, Gavin. This is kind of like the red button coverage. Okay, this is like the extra bit that kind of not necessarily connected with the subject, but I just flicking through the book, we mentioned it before with the the pictures and the handwritten notes and all the graphics and stuff you've got in there. From a sort of putting the book together point of view, how difficult was it to sort of get everything laid out in a way? Because it's a book like I have never seen before and all that. It must have been a bit of a task to get that bit sorted, even when you got the story there.
Well, I can't take any credit for that. I collated the items, the illustrations, the graphics, and a guy called Duncan, who's the designer for Pitch, who does a lot of work at Brighton, and funnily enough, he designed the current ball in Super League, the Rhino ball. It's in the Super League and the Championship as well, so he has done some work in Rugby League at the moment. He came up with the concept. I told him it was about 1950s Americana, and he got the feel of it. I said, it's this post-war boom of consumerism and commercialism, and he understood that, and he put in a lot of adverts from programmes and tried to give it a feel that the reader will immerse themselves in that 50s feel. And I gave him the all the bits and bobs in chronological order, and then he decided how it would fit on the page, and I think I agree, he did a fantastic job.
And publishing rugby league books, we all know the struggles that rugby league has in terms of getting press and getting coverage. Did you find the people that they were forthcoming? They liked the story. They were interested in this book and what you wanted to write.
Very much so. It's because it's the story. Yeah, it's not that it's a rugby league book. We've thought that trying to push a book that was about American football and rugby league in America, it might be quite difficult, but when people hear the story and see the product, actually see the book, we think it will be well received. The publishers thought it was a great story, and it was worth a punt for them, a publisher based in Sussex, to go for it. I'm very appreciative of Pitch to take a chance to take a punt on me, so to speak. But we're going to hopefully have a launch in California and get people there interested, and then eventually I hope Australia as well.
Take a punt. I like the little pun there, the American football pun, Gavin. And just finally, interest-wise in the book, I've obviously seen a lot of people on Twitter mention it, and a lot from the rugby league press in this country. But I mean, has it been of interest to a wider audience?
Yes, it's been well received so far, but it's very early days, as you say. You've only got your copy today, and literally it only came out 2 days ago, so it's going out now this week. So over the next couple of weeks, I'm hoping people who have influence in newspapers, magazines, etc., will get to see it and feedback positively.
Privilege for you to have brought it to us, Gavin. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thanks very much for having me on.